Howdy, readers. I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse, and this is my first video in this year's shaketember celebration, which I am co-hosting with Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading and Nicole from A Day of Small Things. Now, for this first video, before we dive into the plays, which we'll be doing in the next 3 weekends, Romeo and Juliet, Richard III, and Antony and Cleopatra. We are, each of us today is putting up our version of an original tag that the three of us created together. We're calling it the Shakespeare Journey Tag. So, yeah, as you're watching this video and their videos, if you have a channel and for whatever reason, none of the three of us tag you officially at the end of our videos, feel free to do it, by all means. Yeah, the more people who do, like as with any tag, the more people who do it, the better. Number one, what was your first experience reading Shakespeare and what was it like? Now, unlike a lot of people, I'm sure, I didn't read. I had no exposure to Shakespeare as a child, right? Like, say, under the age of 10 or 12. Yeah, nobody ever read it to me. I never went to see a production, right? Sylvia Plath, famously was taken by her mother to see a production of the Tempest not long after her father died. I can't remember how old she was, but she was under 10 years old. And I never had any experience with Shakespeare like that. So my first experiences reading Shakespeare were in high school, right? Romeo and Juliet in ninth grade. I think we read Julius Caesar in 10th grade. It might have been 11th grade, but I think it was 10th grade. And then Macbeth in 12th grade. And it was terrible. And the reason why it was terrible was because we, the students, we're all sitting there at our desks, right? There was no effort. There was no attempt by the teacher to bring us up and perform, right? To help us kind of dig into the language, understand what it means, allow our bodies and our body language to inform our understanding of the language. There was none of that at all, right? I mean, we're all sitting at our desks, face front. And it's the teacher just doing what he or she, the least that he or she can do to get by, right, to earn a paycheck. And they would just have us take turns reading aloud. Well, if you've got a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old, reading Shakespeare aloud, right? I mean, the teenager's going to be self-conscious about reading aloud anyway, even if it's something that they understand. It was torture. Like, it felt like torture. Right? I mean, we're stumbling through, we're mispronouncing words, we're reading it slowly, not because we're, trying to be dramatic for effect or anything like this, but because we have no idea what the hell we're reading. And that's the worst thing, right? Even when you see a production of Shakespeare, if they're young actors, oftentimes, they don't know, right? The director hasn't done a good enough job of communicating to them, like, what is actually happening in the play through this dialogue. And so oftentimes with productions, Kelly and I saw a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream that was done by teenagers, right? Everyone in it was a teenager. And it wasn't even a school production. It was at the Shiny Little Theater in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And yeah, when you have that, it can be charming, right? But the kids don't know what they're saying. They don't understand what is actually happening in the text. And that was the case, right? In the classroom, we're reading our way through it like zombies, and it's inspiring no love for the text, no comprehension of the text, no appreciation, no wonder of the text, and it's just a crying shame that is most people's, in America at least, most people's first exposure to Shakespeare. It was mine, and I certainly regret that. Number two, has the reading of a Shakespeare play ever brought you to tears? What scene was it, and where were you when it happened? So this is one of the questions that I came up with. I've talked about this on my channel before, so I apologize if you've heard the story, but it's only happened to me once that the reading of Shakespeare has brought me to tears, and this was at the end of winter, right, in early 1999, right, so probably like, I don't know, late February or early March, something like that. I was in the honors lounge at the University of Wyoming, and just tucked into a chair, reading, keeping to myself. I seem to remember that there was a kind of party taking place, right? There was cake and all these students kind of bustling about, and I have no idea what it was for. They probably wish that I wasn't in there. But I was reading Titus Andronicus, and it was the scene that made me cry was the scene where Lavinia's uncle discovers her in the woods after she has been raped and mutilated. And his speech in that scene just broke me, man. Like, it was just devastating. And, the thing that I marvel about still when that happened is that I was surrounded by people, right? And as a young college kid, I was 21, must have been 24 when that happened. I mean, yeah, you don't want like the good looking chicks in the honors department like around you, seeing you cry in a chair. That's not what you want. And yeah, I just didn't. I was so immersed in what I was reading, and so just caught up in the horror and the heartbreak of it. Nothing else occurred to me, and yeah, so that's my example. Number 3, are there any people that have played a significant role in your Shakespeare journey? Now, there are a few, but the one I'm going to talk about, and I've talked about him before on my channel as well, is my old Professor Chuck Thompson. Back when I was a junior college student in Cheyenne, before I went to university, I took an introduction to theater class. And I still remember the cover of the textbook. I still remember the things that we watched in the class. I still remember moments from some of his lectures. And it was the first time, I think, even though I had a couple of really good English teachers in high school, not the ones who punished us with the Shakespeare plays, but I think it was the first time I ever saw an instructor of mine really on fire for drama. And I was a big movie buff already by that time in my life, and was just kind of devouring all the films I could. But this was the first time I had ever seen anybody who felt the way I did about movies, about plays, and about the stage. And it was a pleasure. And even after I was a student of his, my brother took his class as well, and we both got very, very close to him. And he would, he would like rent a van each year, and take a group of students and former students down to the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, and he would get these bag lunches for us and everything, and seeing some of those plays. Particularly Taming of the Shrew and, oh God, was it Twelfth Night? I think it was Twelfth Night. It was just some of the best memories of my life, really. Just spectacular stuff. So he was the first person I ever knew who was just absolutely in love with Shakespeare. Just absolutely in love with Shakespeare. And when a teacher is in love with Shakespeare, it rubs off on the students, right? Because they get it. And, they understand what the plays are about. They've seen all kinds of productions of them. And they want students they want to share that, right? So they want students to get it. And so they find ways to make students get it. And, so he was instrumental in helping me find my way into the world of William Shakespeare. Let's see. Number 4. Do you have a favorite book or film about Shakespeare? Yeah, I do. And the answer to that would be Will in the World, How Shakespeare Became Shakespeare by Stephen Greenblatt. This is a kind of speculative biography of William Shakespeare, the Stratford Shakespeare. And when I read this, so I was working at Barnes and Noble at the time and hadn't been working there terribly long. But I had spent so many years just watching hundreds of films and not really reading very many books, even though I was an English major. My attention span was just, it had been damaged or atrophied to some degree, and by all of the movie watching and not so much reading. And this was the book. It was brand new there at the bookstore, and at the time, employees could check out hardcovers from the store. They had to leave the dust jacket at the store in a manila folder or something, and then we could take the book home and treat it with kid gloves and bring it back. And I did that with this book, and at the time I was, I don't know, able to read like 10 pages at a time before my attention would just flit off, right? Like the dog and Up. But I started this book, and the next thing I knew, I had read 50 or 60 pages without moving. I was just enthralled by it. And as soon as I was done reading it, I actually checked out the audiobook, the book on CD from the library, and listened to it. I just didn't want to leave Greenblatt's mind behind. I didn't want to, remove myself or divorce myself from his idea of who Shakespeare was, and why he was, and how he was, and it's a really beautiful book. I mean, however accurate it is or is not, I tend to think it probably is. But it's just really beautifully written. Number 5, which character in Shakespeare most resembles you, and in what ways? So I couldn't narrow it down to just one character, of course. I chose 3 that I feel like I'm a kind of amalgam of these 3 characters. So the first one I chose was Hamlet, right? And the reason for that is I'm really hot-tempered, like Hamlet is. And Hamlet also, obviously, overthinks things, right? He's analytical to a fault. And I think that that's very much me as well. And I can go down these rabbit holes in my brain. I don't know, where I'm seeing all of these arteries of possibility, and and I also tend to be reasonably paranoid a lot of times as well, and so if you're paranoid about something, then you begin to like analyze possibilities again to a degree that it feels like it can make you insane. And so that's why I feel like I'm like Hamlet. And then there's Bottom from A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I'm like Bottom in a couple of different ways, right? So when they're getting ready or when they're rehearsing the play, right? The Rude Mechanicals in A Midsummer Night's Dream, when they're rehearsing their play, Bottom is not directing, right? If I remember right, that's Peter Quince. But Bottom fancies himself a director, and I wanted to be a filmmaker terribly when I was a teenager and on into my 20s, and that was my dream. And even now, like I'll see a film and there'll be a scene or a shot, and I'll watch it, and it might even be a film that I love, but there's just a moment in it, and I think to myself, I could have done that better. The director, whomever he or she is, didn't figure out how to correctly stage this or frame this, and so that's a little bit like Bottom in the play. He always feels like he knows better than the person who's actually in charge. But Bottom is also he's an ass, literally. Like he becomes an ass, right? He's like a woolly ass, which I am as well. And as a woolly ass, the queen of the fairies falls in love with him, right? And and you guys know my wife Kelly, right? On her channel, Books I'm Not Reading. Yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to describe us as Bottom and Titania, right? Yeah, there's something of that dynamic, I think, in our relationship. So Hamlet, Bottom, and then also Toby Belch from Twelfth Night. And the reason for that is, so Toby's a heavy drinker. I'm not a heavy drinker anymore, but I have been at times in my life. And Toby is also really given to mischief, which I feel like I can be too. And here's the thing. Here's where I'm being really, really honest about myself. Toby Belch is also prone to ridiculing others. He's open to cruelty, and it's not something I'm proud of by any stretch of the imagination. But those things are true of me as well. I have a really low threshold for what I regard as stupidity, and if I see people or hear people or witness people doing or saying stupid things, I shouldn't make fun of them. I shouldn't ridicule them. I shouldn't, set them up only to topple them down, right? But sometimes I do, and yeah. So that's, again, it's not something I'm proud of, but it's, if I'm being honest, I am like Toby Belch in that way. Yeah, I could see myself losing patience with a devoted but dim friend, and yeah, and I'm just being cruel to him in the way that Toby is cruel to Andrew Aguecheek at the end of that play. So anyhow, those are the characters that most resemble me. Number 6, which play would you most like to see performed in a theater, and why? And the answer to that is The Tempest. I think it was the summer after Kelly and I got married. We got tickets to see The Tempest down at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival in Boulder, and it was in their outdoor theater. And I was so excited because I just love The Tempest dearly. And it was just wonderful to be there with Kelly. Well, it rained, right? I mean, well, the start of the play was delayed, if I remember right. It was delayed quite some time, because of the threat of a storm, and then yeah, I mean, right after they started doing it, it started raining, and God bless them, they tried. They got a few minutes into their production, but the actor playing Ariel slipped on the stage, and it became clear that it was going to be very dangerous for the actors. And so they canceled it, and I would love to see just a really beautifully done production of The Tempest. Partly because, with the storm at the beginning of this thing and the shipwreck, I would love to see how they take something that is so decidedly outdoors, outside, and bring it inside. Even if it's an open air theater, bring it onto the stage. Give us the feeling that we're on the shoreline, witnessing the tearing apart of a ship in a tempest. I would love to see that done incredibly well, and yeah, I never have. I've seen one production up in Missoula from a traveling company. It was outdoors, and it was charming. It was all right, but it wasn't all that in a bag of chips, and I wish it had been. Let's see, number 7. What actor throughout history would you most like to have seen play Hamlet while in his prime? And for me, the answer to that question is pretty easy, and that's Ian Charleson. Ian Charleson was an actor who died of AIDS in the mid '80s, and is most famous for having played Eric Liddell in Chariots of Fire, which is one of my favorite movies, and his performance in that is one of my favorite performances of all time. He was already revered as a stage actor, and I think that the theatrical community, was aware of what was going on with his health. But the director Richard Eyre, who directed the movie Iris with Kate Winslet and Judi Dench, Richard Eyre was directing a production of Hamlet, starring Daniel Day-Lewis, of all people. I mean, I'd kind of like to see him, seen Daniel Day-Lewis play Hamlet as well. And Daniel Day-Lewis had a breakdown on stage watching it. Like, I mean, he believed that he saw his father's ghost. Right, his father was the poet Cecil Day-Lewis, and his father, if I remember right, died by suicide. And anyway, Daniel Day-Lewis abandoned the production, just dropped out of it. I had this breakdown on stage, and I think he even walked off stage. And so Richard Eyre replaced him with Ian Charleson, even though he had, from what I've read online, he had reservations about that, right? Because Ian Charleson's health was deteriorating. And so actually I have it pulled up on my phone so I can read you just a couple of details. So he died in 1990, right? So it wasn't the mid-'80s. He was diagnosed with HIV in 86, died in 1990, early 1990, like January or February. And he stepped into the role of Hamlet for the rest of this run toward the end of the year before, right, 89. So he gave his final performance as Hamlet just 2 months before he died from AIDS, right? So you can imagine how ravaged his body was at the time. This is long before there were, incredibly effective drugs to treat HIV/AIDS. It says the day following Charleson's final Hamlet performance, when Ian McKellen was given the Evening Standard Award for Best Actor for his Iago in Othello, McKellen offered thanks, but said having seen, quote, the perfect Hamlet at the National Theatre the previous night, he thought that not he, but Ian Charleson was truly the best actor of 1989, and he gave Charleson his statuette. That's beautiful, and that makes me really, really wish I could have seen such a fine actor as Ian Charleson in probably the greatest role in the English language, knowing how close he was to death, right? And that's the thing about Hamlet, right? Like, I mean, he knows. He has a sense of how close he is to death, right? He's constantly being visited by ghosts. And you get the feeling that Hamlet is pushing, he's always pushing things further than he knows he should, further than is going to be good or safe for him. Deliver your favorite speech or soliloquy from a Shakespeare play. All right, so that is from The Tempest. And this is right after Ariel has had a conversation with Prospero and has turned, to some degree, has turned Prospero's heart, or has created the conditions, created the space for Prospero to himself turn his heart. Here's my favorite speech from Shakespeare. Ye elves of hills, brooks, standing lakes, and groves, and ye that on the sands with printless foot do chase the ebbing Neptune, and do fly him when he comes back. You demi-puppets, that by moonshine do the green sour ringlets make, whereof the yew not bites, and you whose pastime is to make midnight mushrooms that rejoice to hear the solemn curfew. By whose aid, weak masters though ye be, I have bedimmed the noontide sun, called forth the mutinous winds, and twixt the green sea and the azured vault set roaring war. To the dread rattling thunder have I given fire, and rifted Jove's stout oak with his own bolt. The strong-based promontory have I made shake, and by the spurs plucked up the pine and cedar. Graves at my command have waked their sleepers, oped and let 'em forth by my so potent art. But this rough magic I here abjure, and when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, to work mine end upon their senses that this airy charm is for, I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book. Yeah, that's just lovely, right? There's just no denying that. Let's see, number 9. Do any of Shakespeare's plays intimidate you? If yes, what play and why? The answer to that is yes, Troilus and Cressida. I read it as an undergrad, and I couldn't tell you even then what it was about, right? So even though, yeah, like I knew how to get the language, right? Like I knew all the different footholds on the rock face that is Shakespeare. I mean, not all the footholds, but I knew enough to get up the side of the cliff. I just couldn't with that play, man. That is a really difficult play. Yeah, so I should probably take another crack at it at some point. After all, as the gray on my face will attest, I am no longer the strapping young lad that I was as an undergraduate. Let's see, number 10. What tips would you give to intimidated readers coming to Shakespeare for the first time? So, I don't know, there's some obvious ones, etc., but I think the most important thing is that you need to give yourself permission to struggle, right? Don't expect that because English is your first language and these plays are written in English that you should therefore be able to just unlock them magically like it's a trunk or something, right? Or like it's like a lock on your front door. Don't think that way. Don't expect to understand everything straight away. You're not going to, and you need to give yourself room to accept that you're not going to, right? Because when you do that, you have places to go. And, if you were just a genius and you could read it and just all of a sudden knew exactly what was going on, there's no place for you to go at that point. And going is half the fun with Shakespeare. So, so give yourself permission to struggle. Which is your favorite, number 11, which is your favorite Shakespeare play and why? If you hadn't already guessed, The Tempest. I just love The Tempest. I've read it so many times. And the biggest reason why I love this play so much is that I feel like it's Shakespeare's wisest play. I feel like it's his most generous play and his most gentle play, which is ironic, right? Because it opens with the wrecking of a ship. These people, feeling as though their lives are on a precipice about to be lost. But this is a play about grace. It's about the Christian conception of grace. Earlier in his career, you just had Shakespeare, writing, very early on, writing things like Titus Andronicus and essentially kind of copying the trends of the day, right? I mean, like lots of blood and lots of gore, and but by the end of his career, he was writing something like this. That again, I mean, it ends with reconciliation, and it ends with people who deserve the absolute worst being forgiven. And I just think that's an extraordinary and a really beautiful thing. And that's why I love The Tempest so much. And finally, tag other booktubers. So I'm going to tag one of the original creators of shaketember, formerly known as ShakeTube. And that is Lukash at A Cruel Reader's Thesis. He doesn't make videos anymore, but he has assured me that if I tag him in this, that he will emerge with a new video with his version of this. So Lukash at A Cruel Reader's Thesis. I'm going to tag Roz, my friend Roz at Scally Dandling About the Books. And I'm going to tag someone who I don't really know. A couple people actually I don't really know. But there's a woman named Shelby who has a channel called Shelby Loves Shakespeare. And I don't even know if she's aware of BookTube as an environment, as a phenomenon. I stumbled across her channel. I found her on Instagram, talked to her on Instagram, told her that when Shaketember rolled around, like she should get involved, blah, blah, blah. But again, like Shaketember's rolled around now, and I don't know that, I don't know maybe she's like too busy acting or something. It's quite possible. But I'm going to tag her with a little @ in the description box, and hopefully she'll see this, and hopefully she'll be intrigued enough to make her version of this video, and let us know her answers to all of these questions about Shakespeare. And then finally, I'm going to tag Andrew B. At Andrew B 731. He hasn't made a video in quite some time. It's been 4 months, 6 months, something like that. And so his production on BookTube is, I don't know, it tends to be kind of as sporadic as my own is. Maybe not quite as sporadic as mine is, but when he's made videos about Shakespeare in the past, I've just loved, at every moment, loved hearing what he had to say about Shakespeare and about the authorship controversy and blah 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 blah. So I would love to hear his answers to these questions. So Andrew, if you're watching, yeah, please do the tag. And that's it, everybody. I will leave it there. And I will see you guys next weekend with my video on Romeo and Juliet. So until then, adios.